Hello guys and welcome to the second part of our corporation series. In this video, we are going to discuss the transactions subsequent to formation and organization of a corporation. Okay, without further ado, let's begin with financial statements. So the basic financial statements of a corporation are pretty much the same with sole proprietorship and partnership. Meron pa rin tayong balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flow, statement of changes in equity, then notes to the financial statement. However, meron tayong mga changes or differences in some of the financial statement components of a corporation. We will begin with the statement of financial position. Now, of course, the asset and liability section of the statement of financial position is the same for all types of business. Nagkakaiba lang po sila pagdating sa equity section. When it comes to corporation, the equity section is called shareholders or stockholders equity. So it is divided into three different sections. So una, we have what we call our contributed capital section. So like I mentioned in our previous video, the contributed capital section is composed of the legal capital, which is in this example, yung common stock. Diba? Yung total par value of all common stock issued. Next, we also have the additional paid-in capital. So this could be the share premium for par value shares and the paid-in capital in excess of stated value for stated value shares. So, pag pinag-add natin yung legal capital and additional paid-in capital, yun po yung tinatawag nating contributed capital. So, the next part of the equity section ng corporation is what we call the retained earnings. So, this is a new account for you because corporation lang po ang merong retained earnings. So, basically, the retained earnings is the accumulated profits of a corporation mula nung siya ay na-establish or na-incorporate. So, lahat ng income natin, di ba, before kino-close natin directly to the capital accounts of the sole proprietorship or the partners. However, this time, hindi po siya directly kinikredit sa capital ng ating mga stockholders. Instead, it is credited to the account called retained earnings. So, lahat po yan ng net income. So, nababawasan din yan by, of course, net losses. If we declare dividends, i-minus din yung sa retained earnings and other transactions. So, kapag ka po yung retained earnings natin ay nagkaroon ng negative balance, it is called a deficit. Next part of our shareholders equity section is what we call accumulated other comprehensive income. So, ito po is in relation dun sa ating i-discuss na kasunod. So, babalikan natin mamaya kung ano yung nilalaman ng accumulated OCI part when it comes to the equity section. So, proceed muna tayo to our next financial statement. So, meron tayong tinatawag na Statement of Comprehensive Income. Okay, so the difference na meron itong Statement of Comprehensive Income doon sa ating normal lang na nadidiscuss na income statement is that yung normal income statement, di ba natatapos siya normally sa net income. Di ba? We'll start with sales, we less your cost of goods sold, gross profit, you less your operating expenses, you arrive at your net income. Then that's it. That's the bottom line of it. However, pag sinabi nating Statement of Comprehensive Income, meron pa tayong tinatawag na Other Comprehensive Income section. Now, ang laman po ng Other Comprehensive Income section is mostly mga unrealized gain or losses. So, ito pong mga ito ay mapag-aaralan nyo sa higher accounting. Pero I will give you a brief background or idea kung ano yung mga example nito. For example, you are a company engaged in multinational operations. So, let's say, nagbebenta kayo ng inyong mga products overseas. Okay, let's have an example na nagbenta ka to the US with an invoice price amounting to $1,000. So, let's say during the date of sale, the exchange rate is 50 pesos for each dollar. Now, as of the end of the accounting period, this particular invoice ay hindi pa nababayaran ng iyong customer. Pero as of this date, ang exchange rate na natin is 49 pesos for each dollar. So, ang magiging total price niya na lang is 49,000. So, from the date of sale hanggang sa date of reporting, meron kang naging loss na 1,000. However, this 1,000 is an unrealized loss, okay? It is just a paper loss. Kasi magiging realized loss lang yan pag nangyari na yung transaction itself, which is yung payment ni customer. Now, kaya ka lang naman nagkaroon ng loss kasi required na kailangan i-remeasure mo siya as of reporting date kung magkano yung value niya nung araw na yon. Okay? Pero hindi pa talaga nangyari yung payment. Therefore, magiging realize lang yan pag nag-occur na yung mismong transaction. Okay? So, pag naging realize siya, magiging part siya ng ating profit and loss section. However, pag siya ay unrealized, dito siya magiging part sa other comprehensive income. Okay? So, lahat po ng items na nasa P&L section will be closed to the retained earnings account while all the transactions in the other comprehensive income section will be closed to the accumulated OCI na nandun sa ating equity section kanina sa balance sheet. So, yun po yung accumulated OCI. Doon po napupunta lahat ng mga accumulated unrealized gains and losses. Next, we have statement of changes in capital or equity. So here's an example. Like partnership and sole proprietorship, this financial statement summarizes the movement in the equity section. So since sa corporation, medyo marami tayong accounts sa equity, we have separate columns for each account. Then sa rows, nakalagay doon yung mga movement. Then kung saang account siya makaka-affect. Katulad dito sa example, we start with the balance, beginning balance. Then sa gitna, yung mga transactions na naka-affect sa equity accounts. Then we arrive at the ending balance. So for the columns, we have separate columns for common stock or ordinary share capital, paid-in capital in excess of par or share premium. We also have separate column for the retained earnings and meron siya ditong treasury stock which we will discuss sa ating part 3. So for now, basta alamin nyo lang na merong tinatawag na treasury stock. So sa pinakadulo, we have your total shareholders equity. So basically, ganun din naman. Basta kung anong movement sa account na yon dapat maipakita sa financial statement na ito. Of course, we still have the statement of cash flow. So for this one, wala siyang pinagkaiba for all forms of business. Ganun pa rin, it is divided into operating, investing, and financing activities para makuha natin yung net increase or decrease in cash na ating i-add sa cash balance beginning para makuha natin yung ating ending cash. Okay, then lastly, we have the notes to the financial statements. Next, pagdating sa adjusting and closing entries, ang tanging pinagkaiba lang ng corporation from the other two forms of business is yung sa pag-close ng income summary account. 'Di ba? So dito, meron tayong ganun pa rin, you will close una, 'di ba, the sales to the income summary account. After that, you will close the expenses to the income summary account. Then, yung net balance ng income summary account can be positive or negative, or it would have a debit or credit balance. So, if the income summary has a credit balance, i-close natin siya sa retained earnings by debiting the income summary account, di ba, para maging zero, then we will credit retained earnings. So, that is if it is a profit situation. On the other hand, if the income summary account has a debit balance, so we will debit retained earnings instead and credit income summary account if it is a loss situation. So yun lang naman yung pinagkaiba. Alright, let us now discuss dividends. So dividends are distribution to the shareholders of the corporate earnings based on the number of shares held by them. So like I mentioned kanina, yung earnings ng corporation, hindi natin directly kinikredit sa capital accounts ng owners nila, which is in this case is yung shareholders or stockholders. Instead, binibigyan natin sila ng dividends, which is their share for the earnings. With that being said, hindi po lahat ng earnings binibigay as dividends. Okay? So it depends kung magkano yung gustong i-declare ng ating board of directors. So we have the important matters concerning dividends. So first, dividends are paid out of the retained earnings and only outstanding shares are entitled. Therefore, kung yung balance ng retained earnings mo is negative, it means hindi ka pwedeng mag-declare ng dividends. Kasi po, wala kang pagkukunan noong dividends na i-declare mo. At the same time, only outstanding shares lang daw yung entitled. Like I mentioned before, hindi lahat ng issued ay outstanding because of the existence ng treasury shares. So, issued shares minus treasury shares is yung ating outstanding shares. Only those who are outstanding shares would receive dividends. Because, like I said in the previous video, hindi ka naman magbabayad ng dividends to your treasury shares because those are issued to yourself, 'di ba? Hindi mo nababayaran yung sarili mo ng dividends. Next matter is that the power to declare dividends is vested upon the board of directors. So, nasa kanila yung kapangyarihan kung gusto nilang mag-declare ng dividends or hindi. Hindi po required mag-declare ng dividends ang BOD. Nasa decision po nila yun. Kung sa tingin nila merong enough retained earnings yung corporation, then they will declare dividends. But if they think na kakailanganin nila yung retained earnings for some other purposes, then pwede nilang i-hold muna yung distribution and declaration of dividends. Now, here are the important dates concerning dividends. So, we have 3 dates that we have to remember pagdating sa dividends. So, una, we have the date of declaration, date of record, and date of distribution. So, sa date of declaration, so as the name implies, dito po sinasabi ng Board of Directors na meron tayong dividend kung magkano at kung kailan babayaran. So, dito po normally nagkakaroon ng approval by the Board of Directors na magdi-declare ng dividend. So, normally this can happen sa isang meeting called for that purpose. So, sa date of declaration, doon po tayo nag-e-entry to debit retained earnings. So, binabawasan na natin yung retained earnings sa date of declaration pa lang, regardless kung kailan natin siya actually babayaran. Next date is the date of record. So, the shareholders as of this date would be the recipient of the dividends. So, basically, ibig sabihin lang po nito kung sino yung shareholders nung panahon ng date of record, sila lang yung makakatanggap ng dividend. So, hindi po ibig sabihin na kapag nag-declare automatically kung sino yung shareholders nun, yun yung makakatanggap. Diba? Pwede pang magbenta yung mga shareholders from the date of declaration hanggang sa date of record. Now, kung sino yung nagmamay-ari or may hawak ng shares as of the date of record, then siya yung makaka-receive ng dividends kahit pa ibenta niya yung shares subsequently. Then, lastly, we have the date of distribution, which is the date of actual payment of the dividends to the shareholders. Now, from the date of declaration to the date of record, the shares would sell dividends on. Ibig sabihin, yung value po ng share magiging yung market price niya plus yung amount ng dividend. Kasi 'di ba, kung sino man yung maka-receive or maging holder ng shares from the date of declaration to the date of record, siya yung makaka-receive ng dividends. Kaya it is only right na yung price ng share would include yung price ng dividend. On the other hand, from the date of record to the date of distribution, the shares would sell ex-dividend or without the amount of dividend declared. So for us to be able to understand this better, let's have an example of this one. So let's assume the following information. So let's say na nag-declare yung Board of Directors ng dividend nung June 27 for all shareholders ng date of record as of August 2, which will be paid on September 15. Okay, now, so syempre magde-debit tayo ng retained earnings nung June 27. So let's say na yung dineclare na dividend is 5 pesos for each share. So, sa kada isang pirasong share na hawak mo, kikita yon ng 5 pesos na dividend. Now, from June 27 to August 2, the shares would sell dividends on, di ba? Or with the amount of dividends. So, if the shares have market value of 20 per share and nag-declare ng dividends na 5 pesos per share, then it would sell at 25 pesos per share from June 27 to August 2. Kasi from this date hanggang August 2, kung sino man yung may hawak ng share, siya yung makaka-receive ng dividend. Okay? Now, after August 2, kahit ibenta pa nung shareholder yung kanyang share sa ibang tao, siya pa rin yung makakatanggap ng share kasi siya yung shareholder as of August 2. Kaya po, from August 3 to September 15, the shares would sell ex-dividend or without the value of dividend. So, at market value lang siya ng 20 pesos. So, ganun po siya. So, we have different types of dividends. Una, meron tayong tinatawag na cash dividends. So, very self-explanatory. Pag cash dividends, syempre magbabayad ka ng dividends in the form of cash. Next, we also have scrip dividends. So, pag scrip dividends, this is actually a promissory note. So, ginagawa to ng corporation pag meron silang enough na retained earnings to declare dividends but they do not have enough cash. So, ang gagawin nila, they will write promissory note na magde-declare sila ng dividend payable at a later date kapag ka meron ng available cash. Next, we also have what we call property dividends. So, dito naman, ang i-distribute natin na dividends is non-cash asset. So, it can be an investment to other companies, it can be an equipment, any form of non-cash asset. So, we have to remember these points pag nag-a-account tayo ng property dividends. Una, this is recorded at the fair value of the non-cash asset distributed. So, that is on the date of declaration. So, ang gagamitin daw natin is the fair value. Kailangan din natin mag-year-end remeasurement kasi syempre nagbabago yung fair value ng non-cash asset. So, at year-end, if hindi pa na-distribute yung dividends to the shareholders, you have to update kung magkano yung value niya. Then, lastly, on the date of distribution, you will record gain or loss on distribution. Kasi, again, it is possible na from the remeasurement date, which is nung year-end, hanggang nung date of distribution, nagbago na naman yung kanyang fair value. So, in that case, kung magkano yung difference nun, this will now be recorded as gain or loss in distribution. However po, for this particular subject, ang ina-assume natin palagi is that the fair values and the carrying values of the non-cash asset that will be distributed as dividends are the same. So, hindi po natin may encounter dito yung year-end remeasurement tsaka yung gain or loss on distribution. Binanggit ko lang din po kasi yun po yung dapat natin gawin if ever na magkaiba yung fair value. Pero again, for this subject, focus lang tayo sa same carrying values. So, mapag-aaralan nyo yung different fair values sa higher accounting subjects. Last type of dividend, we have what we call the stock dividends. So, dito naman, ang dineclare nating dividend is our own shares. So, nag-issue tayo ng additional shares to stockholders. So, it can be a small stock dividend if it is less than 20%, in which case, i-record natin siya at fair value. Now, if it is a large stock dividend which is 20% or more, we will record it at the par or the stated value of the share. So, no share premium will be recognized pag large stock dividend. Alright, it's time for our first illustration, which is about accounting for cash, property, and stock dividends. This is also exercise 9-6 of your book. So allow me to read the problem. The PQR Corporation reports the following balances as of January 1, 2014. We have ordinary share capital 25 pesos par, 2,000 shares outstanding for a total par value of 50,000. We have ordinary share premium at 20,000 and retained earnings at 150,000 pesos. So the following dividend declaration were made during the year. First, on March 15, declared a cash dividend of 5 peso per share payable on April 15 to shareholders of record of March 31. Next, on July 15, declared as dividends the stock of Pentagon Corp owned by PQR Corp. 1 share of Pentagon Corporation will be distributed for every share of PQR Corporation stock owned. The stocks of Pentagon have a carrying value of 20 pesos per share. And lastly, on October 15, declared a 30% stock dividend distributable on December 1 to shareholders of record on November 15. Stocks are selling on this date at 50 pesos per share. So the requirement is for us to record the declaration and distribution of the aforementioned dividends. Alright, let's begin with our first illustration. So our first transaction is yung declaration natin ng cash dividend on March 15. So like I mentioned a while ago, dalawang beses tayo mag-entry when it comes to dividend. First, on the date of declaration. Second is on the date of payment. So let's start with, so this is the year 2014. Then, nag-declare tayo nung March 15. Alright, so nag-declare daw tayo ng cash dividend ng 5 pesos per share. So, ilan po ba yung outstanding shares natin as of March 15? So, nakalagay dyan 2,000 shares. So, ang assumption is wala namang nabago dyan hanggang October 15. Therefore, we will multiply 2,000 shares by 5 pesos, which is the dividend declared per share. So, that would be 10,000. Yan po yung ating ide-debit sa retained earnings. So that would be debit of 10,000. At the same time, we will also credit the account that we call cash dividends payable. Now, this account is reported as current liability in the statement of financial position. So that's it for our entry on the date of declaration. Next, for the date of distribution, diba, that will be on April 15. Yung March 31 dyan is the date of record. Therefore, sa April 15, ito yung actual day na magbabayad ka ng cash. So, simply, you just debit yung cash dividends payable at 10,000. Then, of course, you will credit cash at 10,000. Dito nangyari yung actual dividend payout. Next type of dividend declared is on July 15. So, this time, okay, so huwag kayo ma-confuse with this one. Tandaan nyo na tayo si PQR Corporation. So, meron tayong stocks ng another company which is si Pentagon Corporation. So, sa part natin as PQR Corporation, that's an investment. So, it's an asset ni PQR na i-distribute niya sa kanyang mga stockholders. So, like I mentioned, diba, if it is a non-cash asset that will be distributed to the stockholders, it will be considered a property dividend. Okay, so this one is a property dividend. How are we going to account for this? Sabi dyan, 1 share of Pentagon will be distributed for every share of PQR Corp. So, 1:1. Okay, so if you have 2,000 shares outstanding, bibigay ka rin ng 2,000 shares ni Pentagon. Alright, so, paano natin i-account, diba? So, ganun pa rin, on July 15, we will debit retained earnings. The question is, how much? Alright, so diba kanina sabi natin, it should be recorded at the fair value of the non-cash asset distributed. However, this time, walang binigay na fair value. Ang meron lang, carrying value of the Pentagon Corp share, which is 20 pesos per share. So, yun na po yung ating gagamitin. Alright, so, that would simply be 2,000 times 20. So, we have 40,000. So, we will debit retained earnings by 40,000 and we will credit property dividends payable. Alright, so that is 40,000 as well. Now, kailan yung date of distribution? Alright, walang sinabi. So, wala natin ilalagay na date pero i-record natin yung kanyang distribution. So, that would be debit property dividends payable. Then, we will credit, since this is an investment, diba? We will credit investment in Pentagon Corp. Ayan. So, that is also at 40,000. Next type of dividend is on October 15. Nag-declare tayo ng 30% stock dividend. So, diba, this is considered a large stock dividend. With that being said, it should be recorded at the par value of the shares. Yun yung sabi natin kanina. Therefore, on this date, diba, compute natin. If we have 2,000 shares, tas nag-declare tayo ng 30% stock dividend distributable, ibig sabihin nun, mag-i-issue tayo sa shareholders ng additional 30% of this 2,000, which is how many shares? Okay, mag-i-issue tayo ng additional 600 shares to our existing shareholders. So, syempre, hahatiin mo yan sa kanila based doon sa number of shares na currently ay hawak nila. Now, on this date, di ba may binigay dyan na selling price na 50 pesos? We will not use that because this is a large stock dividend. Gagamitin lang natin yon if this is a small stock dividend. Therefore, we will multiply the 600 shares by its par value of 25 pesos. So, that is 15,000. Okay, so on October 15, we will debit retained earnings at 15,000. Then we have share capital dividends distributable at 15,000. So, ito na po yung tinutukoy nating distributable doon sa ating previous video. Dito po nang gagaling iyon pag nag-declare tayo ng stock dividends. Okay, so this is payable daw on December 1. So, on December 1, we will record the payout or the actual issuance of the shares to the stockholders. So, that would be debit share capital dividends distributable and credit ordinary share capital. So that would be for 15,000 parehas. Okay, so para ma-account din natin kung paano pag small stock dividend, let's have an alternate version of October 15. So instead of 30% stock dividend, let's assume na ang dineclare nung October 15 is 18%. Okay? So, let's say 18% stock dividend instead of 30%. So, kung ganun yung scenario, maiiba yung entry natin, of course, noong October 15. So, alamin natin ilan yung number of shares that we are going to issue. So, if we have 2,000 shares outstanding multiplied by 18%, we will issue an additional 360 shares. So, since this is less than 20%, this is a small stock dividend. In which case, yung 360 shares, i-record natin siya at the market value of the shares during October 15, which is given to us at 50 pesos per share. Therefore, we will multiply 360 shares by 50 pesos per share. So that would be 18,000. So we will debit retained earnings at 18,000 pesos. Next, we will credit, of course, share capital, dividends, distributable, at the par value. So we have 360 shares times 25. So that would be 9,000. Then yung difference between the two, which is 9,000 ulit, would be credited of course to ordinary share premium. Alright, so in short, kapag small stock dividend, automatically sa date of declaration, may i-record ka na share premium because the dividends will be recorded at the market value. However, if it is a large stock dividend like we did kanina dun sa ating previous example, is that it will be recorded at the par value, so there won't be any share premium. Alright, next on December 1, on the date of distribution, we will debit share capital, dividends, distributable, and we will credit ordinary share capital for 9,000. Parehas. Alright, so that's it for our first illustration. Next illustration, illustration 2. So I have here a separate example for scrip dividends. So assume that ABC Corporation declared an 8% scrip dividends on April 1, 2020, payable on April 1, 2021 with interest at the rate of 12%. The total par value of the outstanding shares of ABC Corporation is 1 million pesos. So for this particular illustration, we are required to prepare the necessary entries to record the aforementioned transactions. Okay, for our next illustration, di ba pag scrip dividends, dinideclare natin to if we have enough retained earnings but we don't have enough cash. So we will issue promissory notes to our stockholders that we will pay dividends at a later date. So in this particular problem, di ba we will pay our dividends next year after 1 year. So the dividends is declared at 8% of the total outstanding shares of ABC Corporation with total par value of 1 million. So magkano yon? We have 1 million times 8%. So that would be 80,000 pesos. So syempre on date of declaration, which is on April 1, 2020, we will debit retained earnings for 80,000. Of course, we will credit scrip dividends payable at the same amount of 80,000. Now, there is a special accounting concern kapag kayong ating scrip dividends is distributable next year. Kasi tatawid siya ng isang accounting period. Therefore, kailangan nating magkaroon ng adjustment as of December 31, 2020. Kasi 'di ba, this particular scrip dividend has an interest rate of 12%. So, syempre, meron niyang interest expense na dapat tayong i-recognize from April 1, 2020 to December 31, 2020. Okay, so that would be 80,000 times 0.12. So, 96 is our interest per year. Pero since ilang months lang ba siya outstanding noong 2020, bilangin natin April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So 9 months, we will multiply this by 9 over 12. Okay, so ang i-record nating interest expense noong December 31 would be 7,200. Of course, we will credit interest payable for the same amount of 7,200. Oh, by the way pala, yung scrip dividends payable, it will be reported as current liability as of December 31, 2020 because it is expected to be paid within 12 months from the reporting period. Pero kung halimbawang let's say yung dividends is payable ng 2022, it should be reported as non-current as of December 31, 2020. Okay, after that, 'di ba pagdating ng April 1, 2021, which is the date of distribution. So, of course, we will debit interest payable, yung kinredit natin kanina. So, this is assuming na walang naging reversing entries. We will debit interest payable at 7,200. Then, we will record another interest expense from December 31, 2020 to April 1, 2021. Siyempre, may in-incur siya ulit na interest from that time. Okay, so that would be, again, di ba, 80,000 times 12%. Then, ilang months yun from December to April 1. So, that would be January, February, March. So, 3 months lang kasi April 1 to. So, times 3 over 12. So, that would be 2,400 pesos. After that, of course, we will now debit yung ating scrip dividends payable amounting to 80,000. And we will credit cash for the total of 24 plus 72 plus 80,000. So that would be 89,600. Okay, so please note na hindi po natin sa scrip dividends payable nire-record yung interest. It is recorded at a separate interest payable account. So that's it for our second illustration. Alright, now let's review yung dividends on preference share which na-discuss naman natin briefly during the previous video. Again, dividends on preference share can be una, cumulative. Pag cumulative po yung dividends on preference share, it means na lahat po ng mga previously unpaid dividends or what we call dividends in arrears, kailangan nating bayaran bago natin isatisfy yung current year's dividend. So if we declare this year, then let's say hindi tayo na-declare in the past 2 years, kailangan bayaran muna natin yung past 2 years ng kanilang dividend before we can actually pay yung current year's dividend. Next, if it is non-cumulative, lahat ng mga dividends na hindi na-declare in prior years would forever be forfeited. Okay? So, hindi na siya babayaran pa. Next, if it's participating, the preference shares would receive additional dividends aside from the fixed dividend rate. So, let's say may dividend rate yung preference share na 12%. If they're participating, after nila makareceive ng 12%, may matatanggap pa sila ulit assuming may matira after giving ordinary shares the same 12%. So, mas maintindihan nyo yun mamaya sa example. So, the participation can be fully participating or partial participating. Pag fully participating, yung buong tira, after giving preference and ordinary shares the same percentage, would be allocated to the preference and ordinary shares based on their capital balances or based on their par values. On the other hand, pag partial participating, may maximum amount lang tayo ng participation. Hindi na pwedeng lumagpas doon yung pwedeng makuha ni preference shares on top of the fixed rate. Alright, then pag non-participating naman po, the preference shares are not entitled to any dividends aside from the regular dividends on their shares. So if non-participating, let's say yung 12% hanggang dun ka na lang, hindi na pwedeng mag-exceed doon. Automatically, yung lahat ng tira would go to the ordinary shares. Alright, so for us to be able to understand yung dividends on preference share better, kung paano siya ina-allocate, let's have illustration 3. So this is also exercise 9-7 of your book. So the STU Co. or company has paid dividends for the last 3 years as follows. So during 2012, nagbayad siya 2.5 million, 2013, 3.5 million, and 2014, 6.5 million. So itong dividend figures na to, para sa lahat na yan, both for preference and ordinary. So during the last 3 years, the company has the following outstanding share capital. Una, 12% preference share capital, 100,000 shares, 100 pesos par. Total par value is 10 million pesos. Ordinary share capital, 500,000 shares, 10 pesos par. Total par value is 5 million pesos. So dividends are in arrears for 2 years at the beginning of 2012. So the requirements are to calculate the amount that will be paid per share and in total on preference share and ordinary shares for each year under each of the following independent assumptions. First, the preference shares are non-cumulative and non-participating. Second, the preference shares are cumulative but non-participating. Third, the preference shares are non-cumulative but participating. Fourth, the preference shares are cumulative and participating. And lastly, number 5, the preference shares are non-cumulative but participating up to an additional 8%. Okay, let's start with our illustration 3. So, first case is that preference shares are non-cumulative and non-participating. So, dahil non-cumulative siya, hindi natin kailangan bayaran yung dividends in arrears which is for 2 years. 'Di ba? So, for 2012, automatically magsa-start na tayo sa current year dividend. So, magkano yung dineclare ng 2012? So, that's 2.5 million. Okay, so let's start with the current year kasi hindi nga natin kailangan bayaran yung arrears, di ba? So, current year. So, for the preference shares, bibigyan mo siya kung magkano yung kanyang required or fixed dividend per year, which is, sabi dyan sa problem, 12% daw. So, if that's 12% and meron siyang 10 million par value, so magiging 10 million times 0.12. So, ang kanyang annual fixed dividend is at 1.2 million. So, magkakaroon dito ng 1.2. Next, since non-participating din siya, automatically, hanggang 1.2 lang yung pwede niyang ma-receive. Yung tira, di ba, meron pa tayong natitira. 2.5 yung total na dineclare. Tapos, 1.2 yung napunta sa preference. So, magkano pa yung natira? 1.3, automatically, mapupunta na yun sa ordinary shares. Okay, so ang total dividend na ating binigay is of course 2.5 million. So yan na yung total dividends na na-receive ng preference and ordinary shares for 2012. Now if we are going to compute yung per share, that would be yung 1.2 i-divide lang natin sa 100,000 shares. Okay? 100,000. Then yung atin pong ordinary shares, 'di ba? We have 1.3 na dividends and we have 500,000 outstanding shares. So we divide that by 500,000. Ang ating dividends per ordinary share is 2.6 pesos. Okay, next for the year 2013, nag-declare tayo ng 3.5 million na dividends. So like kanina, bibigyan ulit natin sila ng current year's dividend. So, preference, again, would receive 1.2 kasi yun yung kanyang fixed dividend rate per year. Then, like kanina, yung tira, 3.5 minus 1.2, 2.3 will be allocated to the ordinary shares. So, ayan po yung ating total dividends declared. Then, if we are going to compute yung per share, copy na lang natin. Ito po ang ating mako-compute. So, we have 12 pesos per share for preference and 4.6 per share for ordinary. Next, during 2014, we declared dividends of 6.5 million. So, the current year ng preference is at 1.2 ulit. Then, yung sobra, 6.5 minus 1.2, mapupunta na sa ordinary. So, that's 5.3. So, 6.5 million yung ating total dividends declared. Then, if we're going to compute yung per share, we have 12 pesos again for preference and for ordinary, we have 10.6. So, anong napansin natin? Kapag siya ay non-participating, automatically, ang maximum amount na pwedeng ma-receive ng ating preference shareholders ay yung fixed dividend rate. So, in this case, that is yung 12% or 1.2. Lahat ng susobra automatically would go to the ordinary shares. Okay? Nagkataon din kasi na non-cumulative. So, hindi tayo nagbayad nung arrears. So, that's it for our first case. Next case, the preference shares are cumulative but non-participating. So, this time, babayaran na natin yung dividends in arrears because it is cumulative. Okay? So, let's start with 2012. Again, we declared 2.5 million of dividends. Okay, so una natin babayaran yung arrears, which is for 2 years daw sa preference shares. So if we have 1.2 million per year na dividends ng preference shares and arrears siya in 2 years, so may utang tayo sa preference shares na 2.4 million. So babayaran muna natin yon kasi siya ay cumulative. After that, tsaka natin babayaran yung current year. So, yung current year, of course, hindi na siya enough, 'di ba? Kasi 1.2 million ulit dapat yung bayaran natin sa current year ng preference. Pero ang natitira na lang sa atin is yung 100,000. Therefore, 100,000 lang muna yung babayaran natin sa current year's dividend ng preference share. Okay? So, in this case, walang marireceive yung ordinary. So, we have, itotal lang natin siya, magkaning na-receive. So, lahat ng 2.5 napunta sa preference shares. Okay? So, ang total dividend distributed natin is of course 2.5. So, let's compute for the per share values. So, 2.5 million divided by 100,000 shares outstanding. So, we have 25 per share. Then, of course, 0 for the ordinary shareholders. Next, for 2013, we have 3.5 million na dividends declared. So, again, meron pa rin tayong arrears, di ba? Kasi, yung current year nung 2012, 100,000 lang yung nabayaran natin. Dapat yung dividends na receive nila nun is 1.2. Therefore, may utang pa tayo sa kanila na 1.1 million mula dun sa 2012. So, yun muna yung babayaran natin ngayon dito sa 2013. So, 1.1. After that, tsaka natin babayaran yung current year niya na 1.2. After that, may natitira pa ba dun sa 3.5? So, we have 3.5 minus 1.1 minus 1.2. Okay, so may 1.2 pa tayo na natitira. That would be given na to the ordinary because this is non-participating. Alright, so magkano yung na-receive? Okay, so from arrears, naka-receive tayo ng total of 1.1 million. Then for the current year, ang total natin is 2.4 million. So, total natin per type of share. Ayan, ang total na na-receive ng preference share is 2.3. Ng ordinary, 1.2. Then, ang total dividends declared is of course 3.5. So, let's compute yung per share values. Let's copy. So, this time, naging 23 per share ang na-receive ng preference. Then, for ordinary, we divide this by 500,000. So, that would be 2.4. Alright? Okay, lastly, 2014. Again, nag-declare tayo ng 6.5 million na dividends. So, this time, wala na tayong arrears. Diba? Kasi bayad na natin yung previous 2 years nung 2012. Then, yung utang natin ng 2012, nabayaran na natin ng 2013. So, during 2014, wala na tayong utang sa preference shares na dividends in arrears. So, diretso na tayo sa current year dividend which is 1.2. After that, yung sobra, automatically mapupunta na sa ordinary. So, that's 6.5 minus 1.2. So, that's 5.3 million. Okay, so yan na yung ating total dividends. Compute natin yung per share amounts. So, that would be 12 for preference shares and 10.6 for ordinary shares. So, that's it for case 2. Okay, now for case 3, the preference shares are non-cumulative but participating. Okay, so since non-cumulative, again, we will not pay dividends in arrears. So automatically, magsistart tayo agad sa dividends ng current year. Okay, so for that, we have preference shares of course at 1.2 million pa din. Next, okay, ganito po ang gagawin nyo kapag participating. Since participating, ibig sabihin, di ba, may tira pa ulit. Okay, by the way, this is for 2012. Kung saan tayo ay nag-declare ng 2.5 million. Okay, so let's continue. So again, if participating, di ba, may tira pa tayo. We have 2.5 million, tapos, ang binigay natin sa preference is 1.2. So, may natitira pang 1.3. Okay. So, ano yung dapat natin gawin pag participating? So, ito po yung mga assumptions. Una, bibigyan muna natin si ordinary shares ng same percentage of dividends. So, if the preference received 12%, bibigyan din muna natin yung ordinary ng 12%. Kasi lugi naman siya, wala pa siyang natatanggap. Okay? After natin siyang bigyan, yung sobra doon, tsaka natin ulit hahatiin sa kanilang dalawa. Para hindi naman super kawawa si ordinary shares. So, with that being said, di ba, we have total par value of the ordinary shares at 5 million. So, i-multiply natin yon by 12%. So, that would be 600,000. Gagawin mo lang po ito pag participating yung shares. Okay? So, that would be total of 1.8 million. After that, di ba, yung remainder, which is how much? So, if we have 2.5 million na dineclare minus 1.8 million na nabayad na natin, we still have 700,000. Okay, now this 700,000 would be allocated again to the ordinary and preference shares based on their total par value of the capital. Okay? So if yung preference, meron tayong 10 million na total capital over the total capital na preference and ordinary, which is 15 million, 10 million plus 5 million, i-multiply natin yon dun sa 700,000 na kailangan nating i-distribute. Yan yung magiging share ng preference shares doon sa ating remainder na 700,000. Yun yung kanyang participation. So that would be 700,000 times 10 over 15. So that is 466,667. Then for the ordinary, so we will just follow the same computation. This time we have 5 million total par value of ordinary shares over the total par value of both preference and ordinary shares, 15 million times 700,000. So magkano ang share ni ordinary shares? That would be 700,000 times 5 over 15. So that would be 233,333. So ang total po niyan, of course, should be 700. Let's see. Ayan, 700,000. So yan na po yung total na lang natanggap. So let's compute. Okay. So for this particular case, noong 2012 nakatanggap yung preference shares ng total of 1.6 million. Then for the ordinary shares, 833,333. So if we're going to compute for the per share, we just divide it by 100,000 shares. And we divide this by 500,000 shares. So wag natin i-round off. Ayan, so that would be 16.67 and 1.67 for the ordinary shares. Next, let's proceed. 2013, diba meron tayong 3.5 na dividend declaration. Okay, again, so let's start with the current year. Kopyahin na lang natin yung nasa taas. Ganun pa rin naman. So, bibigyan ulit natin sila, tag 12%. After this, yung remainder allocate ulit natin based sa total par value. So, we have, diba, 3.5 minus 1.8. So, may 1.7 tayo na remainder. So, for the remainder, gawin nyo lang po yung same process. For ordinary shares, or preference shares muna tayo, di ba? For preference shares, 1.7 million times 10 over 15. Yan yung share niya, 1,133,333. Then, for the ordinary shares, di ba, we have 1.7 million times 5 over 15. So that is 566,667. So ang total niyan, of course, is 1.7 million. After that, yan yung ating total. So magkano yan? For the ordinary shares and the preference shares. So we have 2,333,000 for preference. For ordinary, 1,166,667. Let's compute yung per share figures. Ayan, let's put that here. Okay. Next, for 2014, okay, so we have 6.5 dividend declaration. So, ganun ulit. We start with the current year. Copy na lang natin yun. Okay. For the remainder, magkano yung tira natin for this one? We have 6.5 minus 1.8 million. We still have 4.7 million to allocate between the preference and ordinary shares. So again, ang share ni preference dito would be 4.7 million times 10 over 15. That would be 3,133,333. Next, for the ordinary shares, we have 4.7 million times 5 over 15. So we have 1,566,667 for a total of 4.7 million. So ang total niyan would be 4,333,000 for our preference shares. Then for our ordinary shares, 2,166,667. If we are going to compute for the per share figures, we have 43.33 sa preference and 4.33 pesos for the ordinary shares. Next, for case 4, we have the preference shares are cumulative and participating. So again, since this is cumulative, we will pay for the dividends in arrears. We will begin with 2012 kung saan nag-declare ng dividends na 2.5. Noong mga panahong yon, dividends are in arrears for 2 years. So again, that's 2.4 million. After that, 'di ba, ang natitira na lang is 100,000 to satisfy our current year's dividend. So in this case, walang marireceive ulit si ordinary. So ang total natin would be 2.5 million will go to the preference shareholder. So all of it. Next, the per share figure, we divide this by 100,000. So, 25 pesos per share. Okay, dito tayo, 2013. Declare 3.5 million. So, again, we start with the arrears. So, may utang tayo from 2012 na 1.1 million. So, katulad lang to nung kanina sa cumulative natin ha, wala pa itong pinagkaiba doon. Mamaya pa pag may sobra. So, after that, we can also pay now for the current year's dividend na 1.2. Ayan. So, magkano pa yung tira? So, 3.5 minus 1.1 minus 1.2. Okay, so since 1.2 pa yung sobra, 'di ba? Bibigyan muna natin ulit si ordinary shares ng 12%. Kasi kaya pa nating i-satisfy yung 12% ng ordinary. So, that would be yung 600,000. Ayan. After that, ang natitira na lang natin na remainder is 600,000. So, itong remainder na to, yan yung i-allocate natin again based dun sa par value like we did nung may full participation sa case 3. Okay, so that would be 600,000 times 10 over 15. So, that's 400,000 for the preference shares. And that would be 600,000 times 5 over 15 or 200,000 for the ordinary shares. So, let's compute for the totals. So, ang arrears, binayaran natin total 1.1. For the current year, binayaran natin total 1.8. Then, the remainder is 600,000. So, alamin naman natin yung total per type of share or per class of share. So, for this particular year, ang marireceive ni preference in total is 2.7 million. Ordinary 800,000 for a total dividend of 3.5 million. So, let's copy this. Okay, so for this one, we have 800,000 divided by 500,000 shares. So, magkano yun without rounding off? Ayan. So, for preference shares, we have 27 pesos per share. And for the ordinary shares, we have 1.6 per share. Next, 2014, we have 6.5 million declaration. Okay, so we start with the current year na kasi wala na tayong arrears. Nabayaran na natin yung for 2012 and 2013 na arrears. So, for the current year, again, bigyan mo silang 1.2, sa kanya 600. After that, yung remainder, allocate na ulit natin. So, magkano yung remainder this time? We have 6.5 minus 1.8. So, that's 4.7 times 10 over 15. Okay, that is the share of preference shares. 3,133, 333. Then, para kay ordinary, we have 4.7 times 5 over 15. So, that is 1,566,667. So, for a total of 4.7 million. So, ang total dividend and per share dividends natin for this one would be total is 4,333,333 for the preference shares. For the ordinary shares, 2,166,667. And per share values are preference shares 43.33 and for the ordinary 4.33. Alright, so let's continue. Case 5, the preference shares are non-cumulative but participating up to an additional 8%. So this time, partial participation. So since non-cumulative, we will start with the current year's dividend. Okay, take note na regardless kung full participation or partial participation, yung practice natin na bibigyan muna natin sila ng tag 12% would remain the same, okay? So in this case, bibigyan po ulit natin si preference ng 1.2 and si ordinary ng 600 for a total of 1.8. Dito tayo magkakatalo sa ating remainder. Okay, so dito ang tira natin is, so by the way, this is for year 2012, kung kailan nag-declare tayo ng 2.5 million. Okay. So, yan. After paying yung tag, 12%, we have remainder of 700,000. Now, ano ibig sabihin nung participating siya up to an additional 8%? So, ibig sabihin nun, yun yung maximum. Hindi pwedeng lumagpas doon yung additional na matatanggap ni preference shares. However, hindi palaging 8% ang ibibigay mo. Ganito po ang gagawin. You have to compute una for the full participation and secondly, dun sa 8%. Na kung ano yung mas bababa sa dalawa, yun yung susundin mo. Okay, so paano? Ganito po ang gagawin. Una, let's compute for the amount of the preference share if under full participation. Okay, so kung full participation, di ba, ang magiging computation natin is 700,000 times 10 over 15. So that would be 466,667. Okay, however, kapag kayong 8% participation, magkano yon? Saan natin i-base yung 8%? Doon po ulit sa par value ng total preference shares, which in this case is 10 million, right? So, we multiply 10 million by 8%. 800,000. O, ganito po. Kung ang susundin natin for this particular year is full participation, ang matatanggap lang ni preference should be 466,667. Pero kung susundin natin yung 8% participation rate, ang dapat niyang matanggap is 800,000. So, ang susundin po natin is whichever is lower. Kasi again, to protect the ordinary shares. Kasi isipin nyo, kung ibibigay natin sa kanya yung buong 8%, edi kulang pa yung remainder na 700 sa kanya na ulit mapupunta. And hindi po ganun sa participation. Dapat may matatanggap pa rin si ordinary. Kasi technically, dapat nga sa kanya na yon yung tira. Pero dahil participating si preference share, naghati pa sila ulit. Okay, so again, ang masusunod po is whichever is lower between the full participation rate and the rate stated like this one, yung 8%. Okay, so with that being said, ang magiging share ni preference is 466,667. Then of course, yung sobra ng 700 minus 466,667, 233,333 would be given to the ordinary shareholders. So ang total nun of course is 700,000. So ang total niyan per class of share would be, okay, so 1,666,667 for the preference, and for the ordinary, 833,333. So let's compute the per share values. So divide natin to by 100,000 shares, and this one divide natin by 500,000 shares. So that would be 16.67 and 1.67. Next, during 2013, again, we declared 3.5. So, ganun ulit. We start with the current year, 1.8 for both the ordinary and the preference. Then, magkano yung remainder natin this time? So, magkano yan? 3.5 minus 1.8. So, that would be 1.7 million. Alright. So, again, compute natin. Pag full participation, magkano matatanggap ni preference? So, 1.7 times 10 over 15. So, that would be 1.1. 333,333,333 million. Then, if at 8%, ang magiging share po ni preference share is, ayun na, yung kanina, 800,000. So, ano mas mababa sa dalawa? Yung full participation niya na 8%. So, this time, susundin na natin yung 8%. Kanina kasi, mas bababa sa 8%. Kaya yung sinunod natin. Pero again, the 8% is the maximum. Pero hindi ito yung minimum amount when it comes to participation. Okay? So, in short, 800,000 ang marireceive ni preference shares. Then, of course, yung sobra, which would be 1.7 million minus 800,000, that is 900,000 would go to the ordinary. So, that would be for a total of 1.7 million. So, let's compute the total and per share figures. So, in this case, we have total of 2 million for the preference shares and 1.5 million for the ordinary. Per share figures would be 20 pesos for the preference shares and for the ordinary, 3 pesos per share. Okay, last one, 2014. So, during 2014, declared 6.5 million. So, again, let's give that current year. Okay, then the remainder. This time, ang remainder natin is how much? 6.5 minus 1.8, 4.7. Paulit-ulit na lang tayo dito, no? So anyway, calculate na rin natin. 6.5 minus 1.8 is 4.7. So that is your remainder. Again, under full participation, ang marireceive ni preference would be 4.7 times 10 over 15, 3,133,000. Pero, ang maximum participation niya is 8% lang or 800,000. Therefore, 800 lang ang ibibigay natin sa kanya. So, therefore, yung tira, 4.7 minus 800,000, 3.9 million would now be for the ordinary shares. Okay. Yeah, so for 2014, the preference shares would receive 2 million or 20 pesos per share, and for ordinary, they will receive 4.5 million or 9 pesos per share. So that's it for illustration 3. Next, let's proceed to book value per share. So book value per share is the peso equity in corporate capital of each share capital. So ano ibig sabihin niyan? Basically po, ang sinasabi sa atin ng book value per share or BVPS is that in the event na maliquidate yung ating corporation, tas binenta natin yung lahat ng assets at nabayaran yung lahat ng liabilities, yung makakompute natin dito, yung makukuha natin per share that we have as stockholders. So, yun yung value ng share natin pag na-liquidate, okay? Now, normally, kino-compare din si book value per share sa market value. If the book value per share ay mas mataas sa market value, ibig sabihin, yung stocks natin ay undervalued. Kaya pag tumaas yung BVPS, it is perceived that the stocks are more valuable and therefore the market price should also increase. Okay? So how do we compute ba for the book value per share? So kung isa lang yung ating class of share, di ba? We will just divide the total shareholders' equity by the number of shares outstanding, including subscribed shares. However, if we have two classes of shares, we have to compute for the equity identified with preference and ordinary. So, to compute for the equity identified with preference, ina-add natin yung liquidation value of preference shares plus yung dividends in arrears niya. So, after that, we will divide that by the number of outstanding preference shares to get the book value per share of the preference shares. For the ordinary share, yung total shareholders equity, ima-minus lang natin yung equity identified with preference share since, di ba, residual interest yung napupunta sa ordinary shares. After that, makukuha na natin yung equity identified with the ordinary shares, which we will divide sa ating outstanding ordinary shares to get the book value per share of the ordinary shares. So let's have our illustration for BVPS. So this is exercise 9-8 of your book. So the XYZ Corporation Statement of Financial Position shows total shareholders equity of 5 million as of December 31, 2014. So yun lang yung info. Requirements are compute for the book value per share of each class of share capital under each of the following independent assumptions. First, the company has only one class of shares outstanding, 200,000 ordinary shares, par value is 15 pesos. Number 2, the company has two classes of ordinary shares outstanding, 10,000 shares of 100 peso par, preference share capital with liquidation value of 120 per share, and 100,000 shares of 15 pesos par value ordinary share capital. Okay, so case 1 is that meron lang daw tayong isang uri ng share. So, that is ordinary shares na 200,000. So, pag ganito, di ba, we will just simply divide yung total shareholders equity by the number of ordinary shares to get the book value per share. So, that would be 5 million divided by 200,000. So, that is 25 per share. So, yun na yung book value per share natin dito sa first case. Okay, for the next assumption, di ba, we have two classes of shares outstanding, may preference and ordinary na. So, una, alamin natin yung equity identified with preference shares or PS. So, that would be computed as the liquidation value multiplied by the number of shares, di ba? So, we have 120 per share daw na liquidation value. Multiply lang natin sa 10,000 shares outstanding. So, magkano yon? That would be 120 times 10,000. So that is 1.2 million. So we will divide this by the number of shares outstanding to get the book value per share. So that would be 1.2 million divided by 10,000. So, the book value per share is 120. So, pinahirapan lang natin yung sarili natin, di ba? Multiply natin, tapos divide din natin. So, in short, with that being said, kapag po walang dividends in arrears doon sa problem, kung ano yung liquidation value ng preference shares, yun na rin yung book value per share niya. Again, that is kapag walang dividends in arrears. Pero pag meron, definitely magiging iba yung book value per share ng preference shares. Next, for the ordinary, yung equity identified would be, di ba, we have 5 million na total. Minus natin yung equity identified with preference, which is 1.2. So, yung tira would be the equity identified with ordinary shares. So, that's 5 million minus 1.2. So, that's 3.8 million. Divide natin sa number of shares outstanding natin sa case 2, which is 100,000 daw. So, 3.8 divide 100. That's 38 per share. Okay, so yan po yung kanyang book value per share under case 1 and case 2. Next, we have what we call the earnings per share. So, this is the amount earned during a given period on each share outstanding. So, basically, ito yung kinita ng shares ng mga shareholder. So, isa rin po ito sa mga determinants ng ating market value. Kasi isipin nyo, if the earnings per share is tumataas siya every year, that would be favorable for the company. Kasi yung mga investors would be more interested to invest in our company. Kasi nga, tumataas yung kita, di ba? Because of that, maraming magkakagusto na mag-invest sa business natin. Dahil mataas yung demand for our shares, using the laws of demand and supply, pag mataas yung demand, tataas din yung price ng ating shares. So, ganun siya. Now, we have different, of course, again, computation depending on the class of share. If you have only one class of share, you simply just divide profit by the ordinary shares outstanding. If you have two classes of shares, your profit or loss would be reduced by the dividends declared on non-cumulative preference shares or dividends on cumulative preference shares, whether declared or not, to get the profit attributable to ordinary shares. You divide that by the ordinary shares outstanding to get the earnings per share. Take note na ang may earnings per share lang po ay ordinary shares. So, to illustrate earnings per share, we have exercise 9-10. So, the ZAB Corporation has the following information relating to its share capital. So, we have 10% preference shares, cumulative, 100 peso par value, 30,000 shares authorized, 20,000 shares outstanding for a total par value of 2 million pesos. We also have ordinary shares, 10 pesos par value, 500,000 shares authorized, 300,000 shares outstanding for a total par value of 3 million. So, compute earnings per share assuming that the reported profit of the company is 750,000 pesos. So, let's compute. Since we have two classes of shares, di ba, ima-minus natin sa profit yung dividends nung preference. So, we will start with the profit. Meron na tayong 750,000. So, i-minus lang natin dito yung dividends to preference shares. So, now, since cumulative yung ating preference shares, we will deduct the dividends regardless kung na-declare siya or hindi. Pero kung halimbawa pong non-cumulative, ima-minus lang natin siya if declared. So, let's compute for our dividends. So, we have 2 million times 0.10. So, that is 200,000. So, after that, pag-minusin lang natin yung dalawang yan to get the profit available for ordinary shares. So, ito lang yung pwede natin ibigay sa ordinary shares. So, 750 minus 200. So, that's 550. After that, we just divide that by the number of shares outstanding. So, that's 300,000 ordinary shares, di ba? So, magkano yon? 550 divide 300. So, that's 1.83. That is our earnings per share. So, ganun lang siya kasimple, computein po. So, last concept that we are going to discuss for this video is the appropriation of retained earnings. So, ano ba ibig sabihin ng pag-appropriate ng retained earnings? Ibig sabihin po nito na yung portion ng retained earnings ay itatabi natin for a specific purpose. Dahil tinabi natin siya, hindi natin siya pwedeng galawin. Okay? Pwede lang natin siyang gastusin for that specific purpose kung bakit natin siya itinabi. Therefore, yung appropriated retained earnings cannot be declared or distributed as dividends. So again, the declaration of dividends would come from the unappropriated retained earnings. So bakit ba tayo nag-appropriate ng retained earnings? So we have reasons for these appropriations. So una, it can be because of a legal restriction. So bibigyan ko kayo ng example nito. The law requires na yung retained earnings ay ma-appropriate for an amount equal to the treasury shares acquired. So kung meron kang treasury shares, dapat meron kang nakatabing retained earnings in that same amount. So that's required by the law. Next, another reason can be because of contractual restrictions. So dito naman, kaya ka nagkaroon ng retained earnings appropriation kasi required ng isang contract. So pwedeng contract mo with a lender or with a creditor. Nakasaad sa contract nyo nung nangutang ka na dapat magtabi ka ng certain portion of retained earnings mo for them. So that is their protection para in case na malugi yung kumpanya, may hahabulin yung creditor mula sa'yo, which is yung tinabi mong retained earnings. Next, lastly, it would be discretionary action. So dito, kaya ka nagtabi ng retained earnings kasi gusto ng board of directors. So maaaring nagtabi kayo because of future plans, like gusto nyo mag-expand ng inyong planta, magtayo ng another branch, bumili ng capital assets. So those are reasons for discretionary action. Now, how do we appropriate retained earnings? So simply lamang po, we will just debit retained earnings. So the retained earnings account is understood to be unappropriated kapag ka retained earnings lang. So, i-credit naman natin yung retained earnings appropriated for kung anumang purpose yon. So, if that would be plant expansion, that would be credit retained earnings appropriated for plant expansion. So, kung magkano yung amount, yun lang charge natin dyan. Now, if we wanna cancel the appropriation, so hindi na natin siya gagamitin, ibabalik na natin siya to unappropriated retained earnings. Babalik na rin lang natin yung entering yon. So, we will debit retained earnings appropriated for kung anumang purpose yon. Then credit retained earnings, which again is understood to be unappropriated. Alright, for your self-assessment exercise, please answer Chapter 9, Operations, Dividends, Book Value per Share, and Earnings per Share. The problems are Problem 9-1, 9-4, 9-5, and 9-6. So medyo marami kasi yung ating discussion today. So please answer those problems. So as usual, I will comment dun sa ating Google Classroom group yung link to the answers. Next, for your assignment, you have Chapter 9, Operations, Dividends, Book Value per Share, and Earnings per Share. You have multiple choice questions, MC 9-1 to 9-20, test material number 34, multiple choice theory, items 1 to 24, and test material number 35, multiple choice problems, items 1 to 10. Alright, so I guess that's it for this week's video. So I guess I will see you guys next week for our last topic for this summer term. So until then, please keep safe and healthy and see you next week. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, you can message me at my Facebook account at janseltawat, or you can email me at tawatjansel@gmail.com. See you next time. Bye.